Well, thanks for tuning into this conversation on the sidelines of the India Investor Summit at JP Morgan in Mumbai. We are now going to be in conversation with Filippo Gori, CEO of Asia Pacific at JP Morgan. Filippo, great having you. Thanks for taking the time out and joining us.
Niraj, thank you for having me again. It's great to be here in person after a hiatus of a few years.
Yes, a hiatus of a few years for sure. So, Filippo, tell us from your vantage point when you look at Asia Pacific, and there is this chalk and cheese economic behavior as well as investor interest, I reckon. How do you look at the region and growth of different geographies within that?
Thank you very much. So the region for us is super exciting. We have been in Asia Pacific for 151 years this year, and we have had now a physical presence in India for over 75 years. And there is excitement around the opportunity set that the region is providing us, because if you think about it, by the end of this decade, Asia will probably represent 50% of the GDP of the world, will be housed in this part of the world. Therefore, there is an element of excitement in our minds to think about, if we want to remain the largest financial institution in the world, or one of the largest financial institutions in the world, we have to have a large presence in Asia Pacific. And we have a large presence in Asia Pacific. If you think about India, for instance, it's the country in the world after the US where we have the largest physical presence. We have over 50,000 employees. We have just inaugurating tomorrow with Jamie Dimon the new Mumbai campus. There's another one just opened in Bangalore, state-of-the-art campuses for our employees. The talent pool that we have found in India and more broadly in the region has been amazing. Now, there are growth differentials, there are different opportunities depending on how you look at the region, but our ambition spans the whole Asia Pacific, starting from Japan at the north, Australia to the south. Southeast Asia is providing us with interesting opportunities, and of course, India, which there is an excitement and a buzz in the room here at the conference, if you think about it, because India this year will probably be the fastest growing economy among the largest economies in the world. So there is this excitement. Over 80 corporates represent over 600 investors. It's interesting to be part of this moment.
Yeah, I was told that you guys had to tell a few investors that, hang on, we'll have to accommodate you in the next conference. This year we are full. Is this interest in the Southeast Asian economies and South Asian economies a bit unprecedented of sorts? The reason I ask you is twofold. One, there is this whole move that is happening for establishing alternate centers across countries, and not just necessarily because of China Plus One.
Yeah.
But two, also because of the whole demographic effect and how the demographics in Asia Pacific and Africa are just looking much more conducive for longer term younger population growth.
So there is definitely a little bit of everything. There is an element of China Plus One, there is an element of demographics, there is an element of, for instance, the Indian economy doing fantastically well and people taking notice of that. There is an element, and I know you have spoken with Sajid about this, that 10 years ago, the taper tantrum and how of the Fragile Five, two were in Asia Pacific, India and Indonesia. Fast forward 10 years later, that's not happening. Both countries are doing very well. Indonesia is the fourth largest in terms of population country in the world. So there is excitement in thinking that this part of the world will provide the growth engine over the next few decades that investors want to be part of.
Yeah, and do you get that confidence when you look at Asia Pacific right now? Sure, there are hiccups around growth currently, but or the medium term?
Yes. I mean, if we look at the way we have grown in the region, and our philosophical point is relatively simple. We want to invest in the region and grow with the countries of the region. As the countries grow, we will grow the same way. And for us, the growth of the last decade has been remarkable. And we're just thinking, what's next? Because the opportunities, we're just starting to see some of the opportunities coming up.
Which are these? Where are these?
For instance, in payments. Payments is one of the asset classes where we have invested the most globally, in terms of, if you think about the revolution that it possibly can take place around the payments networks and so on and so forth. It's been a fantastic growth story for us globally. It could become a $20 billion business for us globally, and even in the region, it's been a fantastic growth story. Asset and wealth management, again, there are successions and everything else taking place, change of generation, the amount of wealth that is being generated in this part of the world makes it supremely interesting for us.
So, largely around financial services, if you will, or things related out there, wherein the buzzword that I hear in India currently is a lot on manufacturing as well. Just trying to understand, how do you look at that within India or maybe within Asia Pacific?
So within Asia Pacific, of course, there is an element of some of the manufacturing countries of the world are housed in Asia Pacific. India is a fantastic service center economy. For us, it provides us with over 50,000 employees. It provides an incredible talent pool and leverage to the rest of the organization, both from a tech standpoint and an operations standpoint. Definitely, it's becoming more as well of a manufacturing hub, and you hear and you see things happening. Is the future going in that direction? Possibly. Infrastructure investments are necessary, and I think it's part of the growth story that India will have to produce in order to sustain a manufacturing shift as well.
I'm asking you to call a spade here. When we are in India, the number of announcements that come in, we tend to think that the renaissance in manufacturing is here and now and happening. We don't tend to compare it with what's happening in the rest of the manufacturing powerhouse regions. So I'm requesting you to tell me that, yes, there is noise around that.
Yes.
Relative to what's happening in the rest of the Asia Pacific region, is it still a smaller denomination? Manufacturing?
It looks like it is at this point in time, with an incredible potential for growth, which is what I think India can capture over the next few years with the right investment and the right strategy.
Got it. We were speaking to your colleagues earlier, and there's a lot of talk around what's happening in the M&A space in the whole Asia Pacific region, Japan, Korea, and India.
Yes.
What is your view here?
Listen, 2023 has not been an easy year from a deal-making standpoint. If you look at from an Asia Pacific point of view, May and June were the worst ever months in history in terms of deal flows and so on and so forth. We are seeing green shoots, definitely in the M&A front. We're seeing green shoots on the equity capital markets front. So things are picking up. Private equity investors, financial sponsors have a war chest that they need to deploy. So they're looking at countries, exactly as you mentioned, where there are opportunities to achieve important growth multiples. So we start seeing things happening. Let's hope. At this point, I think it's going to be more a 2024 story than the rest of the year.
Okay. My final question, Filippo, and that is that in a lot of cases, emerging technology, etc., the West tends to be at the forefront, and then others in Asia Pacific tends to follow, if you will. In a few of the things, resource-based or maybe electric vehicles or so on and so forth, we're seeing Asia almost being at the forefront.
Definitely being at the forefront.
Yes, there is a Tesla, but there's a BYD in China and some of the other things. So where is it that you reckon over the course of the next decade, when it comes to either emerging technology or emerging manufacturing or emerging themes, is Asia Pacific scoring, if not necessarily over the West, then at least being right up there?
Well, it definitely, there are some sectors where Asia Pacific is at the forefront. If you think about, you just mentioned one, electric vehicles in general, batteries. If you think about the whole digital economy and the growth of the super apps, which is something that happens in this part of the world, hasn't really happened elsewhere. And therefore, all the alternative ways to make payments and so on and so forth. Healthcare, if you think about it, it's another area where definitely the United States has a leading position, but both India and also China have some fantastic opportunities in that sense. So the growth of some of this sector will definitely propel the region to be at least on par with the rest of the world. I mean, by the rest of the world, I primarily mean the United States.
Okay. And my final question is on India, of course.
Yes.
Two things that a lot of people that I speak to talk about when relative to the rest of the world, the the digital stack in India and how that is kind of quite unique and we are right at the forefront. And two, the investments by the government in public infrastructure, which has been very, very strong.
Yes.
Now, again, tell us relative to the rest of the region and not just in isolation, how do you see it relative? And what do you think the impact of something like this, both the digital infrastructure and the physical public infrastructure, the spends that have happened and the developments that happen could mean for India over the course of the next 5 years?
I think both are two pillars, in my opinion, of the same story. The acceleration in terms of growth that the Indian economy can have. The digital stack is supremely important. It's kind of a giant leap of mankind that we are witnessing, and we have seen in other countries in the region, and it's being replicated here, and it can propel growth in a way that has not been seen before. The infrastructure is part of that critical set of tools that you need to sustain the more traditional sectors. Could be the manufacturing in that sense, but also the digital economy on the other side. So both, in my opinion, they need to go hand in hand to propel this economy to the next levels.
Okay, well, cross fingers for all of that, and maybe we'll get to talk more about it at the next JP Morgan conferences. But such a pleasure talking to you, Filippo. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me again, Niraj.
The pleasure was ours, and viewers, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.